all back to a very specific moment from my childhood. I was 8 years old, staring at my reflection in an airplane window. It was the middle of the night, and outside it was dark. All you could see were the clouds and the faint glow of the cities below. The window acted as a sort of mirror, and I saw my own face staring back at me. And I remember this clearly. At the age of 8, I knew exactly who I was. I was a girl who liked all your classics, Peppa Pig, Doc McStuffins. I loved magic, and I tried to make potions out of mud and grass in my backyard. I adored ladybugs, and I tried to raise an army of them in a bottle with holes in it, which, in hindsight, was not the best idea. I never spent time trying to think about who I was. I just existed. That flight was taking me from Canada to India. And at the time, I was really excited to go back to the place that my parents always talked about, the place where my family was from, where my culture was from. What I didn't know at the time was how much that move was going to change me. But the minute I stepped into the schools in India, I felt it immediately. You see, I had two major issues. Firstly, I only spoke English and Bengali, which, and I learned this the hard way, really does not help you make friends in the state of Gujarat. Second, I had come from a Montessori school, so the classes were laid back, they were relaxed. We had a pizza party at the end of every month. And suddenly, I was in a school where the teachers were strict, loud, and terrifying to 8-year-old me who didn't know what a big crime it was not to write the date at the left-hand corner. Everyone around me seemed to know what they were doing. I didn't. So I did what any child in my situation would do. I began to change myself. And at first, it was small things. I began picking up on the way the other kids spoke. I started watching the same cartoons as them. I laughed along to jokes that made absolutely zero sense to me. Well, all those changes combined, trust me, I'm not saying that these changes were negative. A lot of these changes helped me grow into the person that I am today. But some of them, I didn't even question. I just did whatever seemed to work. But some of these changes made a huge impact on my life. They negatively affected it. Because you see, all of us undergo changes. And this all ties to our identity, to our childhood. Children today are growing up in a world where influence doesn't come in pieces. It comes all at once. Back then, the world influencing me was small. A few teachers, the people sitting beside me, my friends. But for the children growing up today, the world doesn't stay small for long. The next generation, Generation Beta, will grow up in a world where influence doesn't come in pieces. It comes all at once. They won't just be influenced by the people around them. They'll be influenced by every single thing that they see on the internet, on social media. And that, getting finally to the point of my speech, changes the way identity is formed. Because you see, the thing about identity is that it builds slowly. It builds in moments of quiet when no one's reacting, when no one's judging you, when a child is free to like something simply because they like it. That is the space that childhood used to give to us. A space to be free, to like strange things, to do things that didn't quite make sense. A while ago, I used to own a diary when I was around 6 years old, and I was reading it back, and it was essentially a recollection of my daily events, and I managed to maintain it for 2 whole months. The longest I've ever maintained a diary, by the way. In that was a recollection of my daily events. As in one of them, I talked about how I had a full-blown conversation with floating insects. To be fair, in my defense, I'd written that right after watching the Bee movie. There were also drawings. There was this girl with this huge ice cream in her hand, twice the size of her head. Now, obviously, nothing about this drawing was accurate. I mean, I wish ice cream was that big. But it was honest. It showed the things I liked, the colors I was drawn to, the things I was fascinated by, like ginormous cotton candy ice creams. That was identity, and also creativity at its earliest forms. And that kind of creativity doesn't come from getting things perfect right from the start. It comes from getting stuck, changing it, trying again, from figuring things out on your own, from sitting with an idea long enough to understand it and comprehend it in your own way. That process matters. Because in the end, it's not just about what we create, right? It's about how in that process of creation, we begin to recognize our own patterns, the things we're good at, what comes naturally to us, what we're fascinated by. That is how identity builds. But unfortunately, in today's world, that's the exact process that's disappearing. Nowadays, creating things from scratch is not the only option. You can generate images instantly. You can generate writing instantly. You can get answers to questions before you've even had time to think through the question. Now, all of this may seem very fast and efficient, but it takes away from something important. The struggle, the curiosity, the time it takes to sit with an idea and turn it into something that's uniquely yours. That matters. Because children today are no longer creating things from scratch. Nowadays, we are struggling to create a world where everything's original. We see AI images everywhere. But children today aren't just creating less, they're also seeing more. More reactions, more comments, more versions of what a good life is supposed to look like. They see what gets attention, they see what gets ignored, they see what people praise and what people tear apart, and they absorb it. A while ago, I had a friend named Divya in middle school. Now, Divya, she loved art. She used to draw her own characters, entire characters with background stories and lore. It was like an entire universe lived inside her mind. That, by the way, is the power of a child's imagination. But as vast as a child's imagination is, it's just as easy to tear it apart. One day, a group of girls saw her art, and they giggled, they laughed, they whispered amongst themselves mean things, and they went home. It was a small moment. Everybody forgot about it the moment it happened, but not Divya. Her sketchbook started coming out less and less until it stopped coming out at all. And nothing about her imagination changed, mind you. Nothing about her abilities changed, but something about her environment did, and that was enough. You see, one comment is all it takes to make someone go apart from the dreams that they chase. So the question remains, what can we do about this? We can't get rid of the internet. You see, that situation, I've not only seen it happen in class. I've seen it happen plenty of times. Like I said, on the internet. Hundreds of comments, thousands of reactions, and suddenly it feels like everything you're doing is visible. And with that visibility comes pressure. So you start to shape yourself around what feels more accepted, more normal. Am I right? And that becomes the version of our identities that we show to the public. And to change this, we can't get rid of the internet. What we can do is change the environment that children grow up in. Firstly, the way we respond to people matters. Like I said, a single comment can determine whether someone continues to do the thing they love or if they slowly start moving away from it. The way we define success matters. Because if attention and praise from strangers becomes the only indicator of success, then naturally people will start moving towards whatever brings them more attention. And lastly, the spaces we create matters. Because nowadays, even childhood is something that's being constantly watched. In fact, there are entire online spaces devoted to children growing up in front of an audience. Just the other day, I came across a video of a mother yelling at her child, tearing her apart. And it wasn't a learning moment for the audience, no. It was a deeply personal moment. But what really stood out to me in that video was the way that her small, young daughter, with tears streaming down her face, was actively turning away from the camera that was being shoved onto her face. And that moment had been edited, posted, and shared for thousands to see. That is the environment that children are growing up in. Moments where they should be allowed to make mistakes quietly, to learn without being watched, and to grow without an audience. Identity takes space, privacy, time, and repetition. And those are the first things to disappear when everything becomes public. When I think back to that flight, I remember exactly the way my reflection looked. A small face staring back at me, certain in ways I couldn't even comprehend during that time. And that certainty didn't come from confidence. No, it came from simplicity, from not having too many voices shaping it just yet. And thankfully, most of us got to live through that phase. We got to live through that phase till our childhood, or if we were lucky, up till our early teenage years, before the world stepped in. And in that phase, we got to create a preliminary version of our identity. Sure, we grew up, we changed, we began to care about what other people thought about us. We compared, we adjusted, we lost that former version of ourselves. But that version still exists within us somewhere. And it continues to guide us in moments when we're unsure about what to do with ourselves. And that plays a huge role in shaping our identity for the rest of our lives. But Generation Beta, they might never experience that. They will step into the world before they've even had a chance to raise a single question about themselves. For them, comparison will show up while identity is still forming. So perhaps our responsibility isn't just to keep up with this fast-paced world. Perhaps it's also to slow parts of it down, to create spaces where a child can begin to discover themselves. Because every person deserves a phase in their life when they're not performing, not adjusting, not comparing, just existing. And perhaps years later, they'll look back at a face, at a reflection in a mirror, a window, in a memory, and they'll recognize the person staring back. Thank you.